All right. Good evening.
Good evening.
And thank you for coming. Let us begin with a short reading from the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Right? It reads, "A great sign appeared in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars on her head. She was pregnant and cried out in pain as she was about to give birth." There is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. So much. In the heart of the Valley of Mexico, where the sprawling city of Tenochtitlan once shimmered on a vast lake, the Aztecs built a civilization that continues to captivate the world. From their arrival in the 13th century to their dramatic fall in 1521, the Aztecs left a legacy of awe-inspiring architecture, rich cultural traditions, and complex religious practices that shaped their society. The Aztecs, or the Mexica or Mexica people, were not always the dominant power of Mesoamerica, and according to their own legends, they were once nomads wandering the arid lands of northern Mexico, guided by the divine vision of an eagle perched on a cactus, clutching a snake in its talons. They settled on an island in a lake, Texcoco, and began constructing their capital, Tenochtitlan, in 1325. And this prophecy became the foundation of their identity, symbolizing the resilience and divine purpose, a symbol that still graces the modern flag of Mexico. Tenochtitlan grew into a magnificent city connected by causeways and canals, teeming with markets, temples, and palaces. At its center stood the Templo Mayor, a towering double pyramid dedicated to the sun god, which is the war deity, and Tlaloc, the rain god. And here in this temple, priests performed elaborate rituals to ensure cosmic balance. The Aztecs believed the universe was fragile and required a constant nourishment, which they provided through offerings of food, flowers, and most famously, human sacrifices. Their religious worldview was intricate and deeply tied to the cycles of nature. The Aztecs believed the sun fought mighty battles in the underworld to rise again each morning. To aid the sun in its cosmic struggle, they offered the life force of warriors, captives, and children, whose blood they believed carried the power to sustain the gods. And while this practice shocks modern sensibilities, it was seen by Aztecs that as an act of devotion and a necessity to maintain the balance of the universe. And beyond their religious zeal, the Aztecs were skilled in agriculture, engineering, and in arts. They mastered floating gardens that allowed them to cultivate crops on the lake's surface. And this innovation transformed Tenochtitlan into a thriving metropolis capable of supporting a dense population. And their artisans crafted intricate jewelry, feathered hairdresses, and sculptures. And while their poets wove rich tapestries of words celebrating life, death, and the afterlife and the divine, the Aztecs also valued education and maintained two schools, one for the nobility and for the other commoners. Boys learned martial skills and history, while girls were trained in domestic arts and reading. And both were steeped in the traditions and beliefs of their ancestors, ensuring the continuity of their culture. Yet, for all their achievements, the Aztecs' military expansion sowed the seeds of their downfall. They demanded tributes from conquered peoples, fostering resentment among their neighbors. And when Hernan Cortes, the Spanish conqueror, arrived in 1590. He found allies eager to overthrow the empire. The resulting conflict, along with the devastating impact of European diseases, brought the Aztec Empire to an end in 1521. Though centuries have passed, the Aztec story remains alive in the ruins of Tenochtitlan, the songs of the Nahuatl poets, and the vibrant traditions of modern Mexico. And their civilization, which is a blend of beauty and brutality, continues to inspire hope and fascination, a testament to the enduring spirit of Mexican people. But now that's past. Now, even before the sun breaks through the horizon on December 12th, the burst of firecrackers rings throughout Mexico to announce the greatest national fiesta of Costa Rica, the feast of Our Lady of Guadalupe. And celebrating Our Lady of Guadalupe always culminates with the reenactment of the familiar story. In 1531, just a few decades after Christopher Columbus arrived in the New World, and after the fall of Aztec's kingdom, the Mother of God appeared 3 times to a humble Chimeca baptized as Juan Diego. The Blessed Virgin appeared on Saturday, December 9th, 1531, to a 55-year-old neophyte named Juan Diego, who was hurrying down the hill of Tepeyac to hear the Mass in Mexico City. Saint Juan Diego is the first indigenous saint from the Americas. He was a poor and humble peasant from the lowest class of Aztec Indians living in the 16th century Mexico. His native name, I find it very difficult to pronounce. I'm not going to pronounce it. His native name meant eagle that talks. Eagle that talks. He was baptized at the age of 50 by a Franciscan missionary priest from Spain, receiving the Christian name of Juan Diego. Juan Diego was a devout man who would rise before dawn each weekend and walk many miles to the church for Mass and religious instruction classes. It was he to whom Our Lady appeared as a pregnant Aztec princess on the hill of Tepeyac in the present-day Mexico City. And as he was on the way to this long walk to the Mass, he was the messenger chosen by God to be the messenger of the first Marian apparition in the New World. The Blessed Virgin Mary spoke to him in his own native language, calling him by his baptized name, which means the humblest of my sons, or my son the least. She asked Juan Diego to request from the local bishop that a church be built in her honor on the site where she stood, in order that she might distribute her graces to those who call on her in their need. She sent him to Bishop Zumaraga to build a temple where she was. And she was in the same place that night and Sunday night to get the bishop's response. The bishop did not immediately believe the messenger, questioned him and silenced him, and finally called him to ask the lady who claimed to be the mother of the true God for a sign. The neophyte readily agreed to ask the desired sign, and the bishop released him. Juan Diego was busy all Monday with Bernardino Anango, who was dying of fever, and Indian medicine had failed, and he seemed to be on the verge of death. At dawn on Tuesday, December 12, 1531, Juan Diego ran to the nearby convent of Santiago in search of a priest, and to avoid the appearance and the inopportune message to the bishop, he slipped through some other way. But the Blessed Virgin approached him and said, "What path is it that you take, son?" The tender dialogue followed. She reassured Juan Diego about his uncle, to whom she also appeared briefly and was instantly cured. Calling herself Santa Maria de Guadalupe, she told Juan Diego to return to the vision. He asked Mary for the sign he needs, and she told him to go to the rocks and pick roses. Juan Diego knew that this was neither the time nor the place for roses, but he went looking for them, gathering many in the lap of his tilma. A long cape, or tilma is a long cape or a cloth worn by the Mexican Indians, and carrying those roses he returned. The Holy Mother rearranged the roses and told him to keep them intact and invisible until he reached the bishop. And when he met with Bishop Zumaraga, Juan Diego offered the sign in the vision. And as he unfolded his cloth, the roses, fresh and wet with dew, fell. Juan Diego was surprised to see the bishop and his assistants kneeling before him. The life-size figure of the Virgin Mother, as Juan Diego described her, glowed on still. The painting was venerated, kept in the bishop's chapel, and shortly afterwards carried in procession to the preliminary sanctuary. The roughly woven material of the tilma bearing the image is as thin and open as a bad cloth. It is made with vegetable fiber, probably buckwheat, and painters have not understood the imposition of colors on it. They have declared that the canvas was not only inadequate, but was poorly prepared. And they marveled at the apparent coloring in oil, water, tempera, etc. of the same figure. They are equally admired for the floral hues and abundant gold. They and other artists find the perfect proportions for a 15-year-old maid. The figure and the attitude belong to the one who advances. There is a flight and rest in the eager angel of sublimity. The main colors are intense gold, the rays and the stars, greenish blue in the mantle, and pink in the flowering tunic. Several commissions of inquiry gave sworn testimony that corroborates the traditional account of the miraculous origin and influence of painting. Some beliefs related to Juan Diego and his contemporaries were accepted as documentary evidence. Evidence of the existence of a letter from Bishop to his Franciscan brothers in Spain about the apparitions were also given. The clergy, secular and regular, have been remarkably faithful to the devotion to Our Lady of Guadalupe, encouraging it, especially the bishops, to the point of making the protest of faith in the miracle a matter of occasional obligation. And Pope Benedict XIV decreed that Our Lady of Guadalupe should be the national patron of Mexico and made December 12 a feast of obligation with an octave and ordered a special mass and office. And Pope Leo XIII approved a second complete historical nocturnal, ordered the painting to be crowned with his name, and composed a poetic inscription for it. Pope Pius X allowed the Mexican priests to say the Mass of Santa Maria de Guadalupe on the 12th day of each month, and granted indulgences that can be obtained anywhere in the world to pray before the Boby of an image. The Guadalupe apparition is not only one of the earliest Marian apparitions, it is also the only time in history that Our Lady has shared her portrait. And it is not an exaggeration to say that the Guadalupe apparition is the greatest historical moment in the development of Christianity in America. A mere 8 years after the apparition, 8 million people had embraced the Catholic faith in the New World. Not only did Our Lady appear as an indigenous woman, but she also recruited an indigenous native to proclaim her message. The Blessed Mother has an interesting way of empowering poor people like Juan Diego, explains Mark Swick, founder and director of Casa Juan Diego Catholic Worker House in Bristol. You can't speak that kind of empowerment, he says. She chooses an indigenous person, and that is revolutionary. And throughout history, Our Lady chooses to appear almost exclusively to those who wouldn't have a respectable place in society. St. John Paul II, who in 1979 became the first Pope to visit a shrine in Mexico City, described the Guadalupe event as the beginning of evangelization with a vitality that surpassed all expectations. Christ's message, through his mother, took up the central elements of the indigenous culture, purified them, and gave them the definitive sense of salvation. And it is hardly a coincidence that in 1945, the year that the world was ended, Pope Pius XII looked at the suffering, fragmented world and declared Our Lady of Guadalupe as patroness of the Americans. He knew that both continents, North and South, in many ways share a common heritage and future. In the words of Our Lady that Our Lady spoke to Juan Diego, she said, "I am your compassionate mother, yours, your mother, and for you yourself, for everybody here in the land, for each and all together, for all others too, for all folk of every kind. And here I shall listen to their groanings, to their sadness. Here I shall make well and heal up their each and every kind of disappointment, of exhausting pangs, of bitter pain." There have been apparitions of Mary throughout the centuries, and each one seems to be unique. But there are several things that are striking about this appearance. Mary appeared in the form of an Indian woman, and her features are not what we normally see in the religious art. She has black hair and brown skin. People argue that this is more indicative of maybe what Mary looked like. She also appears as a woman who is pregnant. I can think of no other apparition of Mary when this is the case. Why did Mary appear to Juan Diego? The indigenous people were undergoing great trial at the hands of those who were colonizing Mexico. The Christian religion was viewed with suspicion by some native people. It was the religion of the colonizers who wanted to exploit the land and wanted to use the native population as a cheap form of labor. The Christian faith was being remembered for all the wrong reasons. Mary obviously wanted to save the reputation of her son. She wanted to show that Jesus and she would always stand with the poor. Mary would have appeared to the bishop directly or perhaps to the governor, but she appeared to a poor, devout man. He was the one who carried the news that the miraculous apparition had happened. And to this day, one of the fundamental principles of a church in Americas is that we must always exercise a fundamental option for the poor. Our Lady of Guadalupe, we would say, introduced this concept to the New World. What is special about this apparition? The hill where she appeared. The hill where the Blessed Virgin appeared is called Tepeyac Hill. And Tepeyac literally means nose mountain. And here it refers to the fact that Tepeyac Hill is the first and most prominent hill in a series of 3 hills. Tepeyac Hill was also once the most notorious location of child human sacrifice in Aztec culture. She appeared as an Aztec princess. Our Lady appeared to Juan Diego dressed as an Aztec princess. Her clothing, as it appears on Blessed Juan Diego's tilma, is replete with this Aztec symbolicism. Reflection in Mary's eyes. When put under a microscope, scientists discovered that light is reflected in Mary's eyes the exact same way as in a living human eye. When experts examined Our Lady's eyes with satellite imaging, whatever techniques they used, they discovered several human figures reflected in them, sized differently in each eye, exactly how they would appear in human corneas. They include 3 Indians, an elderly bishop, a dark-skinned woman, and a bearded Spaniard. A random assortment of people? Down here, far from it. They match the profiles and nationalities of 7 people who are believed to have been present when Juan Diego unfurled his tilma and the image was seen for the first time. And what does this mean? That the eyes of Our Lady were on the people gathered in that row, and the miraculous image captured her gaze that imprinted upon that tilma. She was right there where Juan Diego unfurled the tilma. But that's not all. A total of 5 other figures are present in the center of her image, which appear to be a father, a mother, a child, and 2 grandparents. And this represents Our Lady's love for families and her message to society not to abandon the beauty and strength of the family. A Japanese optometrist actually fainted or freaked out when examining the eyes on the tilma because he said he was looking right into a living human eye. The roses. First of all, it was winter and flowers weren't blooming at that point. Secondly, the roses that Juan Diego picked up at Mary's request were not native to the region, but were Castilian roses native to Europe, Asia, and North Africa. The bishop recognized the roses because they were grown in the region of Spain, where he was from. It was a special sign for him to believe. The tilma. The tilma is made out of cactus fibers, and this material should have decayed within 5 years, and yet after nearly 500 years, it's still perfectly intact. Over the years, it has had nitric acid spilled directly on it, and even survived a bombing with 12 sticks of dynamite. In 1921, during the build-up of anti-Christian sentiment in Mexico, a bomb attack destroyed marble steps, blasted windows throughout the basilica, and famously bent the altar crucifix backward because of its impact into a dramatic angle, which is now known as the Santo Cristo del Andrade. And yet, the tilma remains in near perfect condition. Miraculously, the tilma itself was unharmed because Jesus, like a good son, protects his mother. Our Lady's clothing. The imagery on the tilma represents the time of Christ and Our Lady's call for love and unity between the new world and the old, as the 2 civilizations began to coexist with each other. The image contains several references to the heathen gods and the Aztec religion and how Our Lady supersedes them. The race behind her, an iconic feature of the image, actually represent the Aztec sun god whom Our Lady eclipses by appearing in front of the sun. The moon below the Virgin's feet, is often referred to as the black moon because of its dark shadowed appearance on the tilma. In Aztec symbolism, the black moon represents the god of the night and darkness and represents the god of life and fertility, whom Our Lady has defeated. And it also references the book of Revelation, chapter 12, verse 1, which we read beginning, which describes the woman with the moon under her feet. Mary's hair. She wears her hair loose beneath her mantle, a sign of virginity in Aztec culture, combined with a black girdle which symbolizes her pregnancy. And this speaks to the dual miracle of the Incarnation and Mary's perpetual virginity. In 1750s, a skeptical artist in Mexico City did an exact recreation of the Tillman, going so far as to even encase it in the same type of glass case. And he kept it in the same environment, exposed to the same conditions as the original Tillman. Within 7 years, his recreation was so badly decayed and rotted that it was removed from public display. It can't be recreated. There are no animal or mineral pigments on the Tillman. These would have been present had the image of the Tillman been painted. There are also no underdrawings or brush strokes on the image. The pigments that were available at the time and in that area would have faded by now, and yet the image still remains fresh. It has faded. Mary's skin tone. The color in Mary's skin changes depending on one's distance from the image. The further you are, the darker the skin tone, and the more she resembles an Aztec princess. The closer you get, the lighter the skin tone, and the more she appears as a young virgin Jewish girl. The stars on her mantle. The stars on Mary's mantle are exactly as they would have appeared on December 12, 1531. The perspective is as if you are looking down from behind the sky to earth, like heaven looking down on earth. The pattern of the stars would have put place the constellation Corona Borealis crown on Mary's forehead, the Virgo, the Virgin, over her heart, and Leo, the lion, over her womb, representing the Lion of Judah. As I said earlier, there was huge success with evangelization and mission works after the apparition. The credit for that unparalleled missionary success, of course, goes to Our Lady of Guadalupe. But there is a fascinating story behind the Guadalupe phenomenon. That story is told in a book called Guadalupe and the Flower World Prophecy by a married couple, Joseph Julian and Monique Gonzalez. To appreciate the sensational success of the Franciscan missionaries after 1531, one must understand that before Our Lady's appearance, they had been frustrated in their efforts to evangelize the indigenous peoples. And Bishop Samarenga, to whom Juan Diego would bring the flowers and that blossomed miraculously out of season on the Dapiat Hill. The bishop had returned to Rome to report that the natives seemed unusually resistant to the gospel. The friars had trouble communicating in their native language, but even more trouble understanding the native culture. The native tribes were pagan, and many aspects of their culture were brutal: human sacrifice, slavery, polygamy. Yet, that same culture also had rich tradition of poetry, song, and speculation about the supernatural and the afterlife. For centuries, the people had heard and memorized songs that told of a glorious place, characterized by lush, fragrant flowers and the singing of beautiful birds, where at last a soul could find true happiness. This place, which the Gonzalez book calls the Flower World Paradise, was ruled by God of near and far, and could only be reached by someone who was worthy, someone who was pure. The most famous of one of these native songs begins with these lines: I pondered within my heart, where will I gather the fragrant flowers? Within my heart I ponder, where will I gather the fragrant flowers? This longing for the flower world paradise, a longing for the perfect life in harmony with the universe, was passed down through the generations. It was passed down to Juan Diego and to many others. It was their faith was the basis of their culture. And of course, they resisted the Franciscan friars' attempts to introduce a different faith. And then came the report that Juan Diego had brought beautiful flowers from a hill, where he had heard the singing of birds, where miracles had taken place. And his story matched with the old myths they grew up with. And while he was a humble common man, Juan Diego was a Christian. He had been baptized. All the few of them had accepted the missionaries' teaching. They had also heard that Christian baptism purifies the soul. So Juan Diego fit the role of the pure man, the man who was worthy to enter the flower world paradise. And soon there were new songs to be sung to the native communities, telling about this remarkable event, putting it in the context of the old myths. The Gonzalez book introduces the possibility that old myths had been planted in the culture of the Mexican tribes long ago, although through the inspiration of the Holy Spirit to prepare them for the gospel message which was to come. While this is a general belief that the tilma alone caused the conversions throughout the land, we would like to approach it within its larger context, understanding that belief in the tilma predicated on belief in the story. And why not? The Gonzalez book calls the principle of the Coratio Evangelica, the understanding that God prepares His people in various ways to accept His word. He prepared the people of Israel for the Messiah. The prophets wrote about Jesus with images that could only be fully understood after the resurrection. The Catholic Church, of course, enjoys the guidance of the Holy Spirit, but not a monopoly on Spirit's inspiration. Whether the tsunami of conversions was due to the tilma or the flower songs, along with, of course, the Virgin Mother's maternal care, the results are undeniable. The friars who had been struggling to be an occasional convert now found their mission courtyards packed with people demanding baptism. The natives traveled for miles, bringing their pagan idols to be burned, accepting penances, regularizing their marriages. The Franciscans now were struggling to cope with the intense desire for the sacraments. They experimented with mass baptism ceremonies until Vatican banned the practice, simply to keep up with the demand. And Mary's visit to Guadalupe is a reminder that God will remember His mercy for all people. And in Mary's Song of Joy, the Magnificat, she praised God because He has put down the mighty, exhorted the lowly, filled the hungry, and set the rich way empty. And people honor Our Lady of Guadalupe because they recognize her motherly concern for them. The story of Guadalupe remains profoundly relevant today, reminding us of the dignity of the marginalized. Appearing to Juan Diego, a humble indigenous man, Mary affirmed the worth of the poor and the underrepresented. In a divided world, her image symbolizes unity, inclusion, and hope, calling us to bridge cultural and economic barriers. And her message of listening to humanity's groanings and bringing healing is as vital now as it was in 1531. I leave you with two reflection questions. Does the story of Our Lady of Guadalupe have any relevance today? What does it speak to you? What is the relevance of this story in your life? And secondly, where does the church need to advocate for the poor today? And as being part of the church, are you doing that? And I'm sure you have been listening to the music in the background. And it has a story behind it, and that's last. A mathematical accountant named Fernando Ocheda made this incredible discovery. The institute that studies the miracle at Guadalupe gave him the mission of studying the image by applying the only science that had not been done before in image studies, using mathematics. He was entrusted to study this image using mathematics as a tool. So he reasoned the following. If the stars of the mantle are the constellations of the sky at the time of its impregnation, Mary's dress represents proportionally the main hills and volcanoes of the topography of Mexico. If the whole image keeps the golden ratio, then it has perfect symmetry. Therefore, it has music. The mathematician Pythagoras had already pointed out that where there is perfect symmetry, there is music. Ocheda says, as their positions were different, he considered that each star, according to its position, each flower on the dress as center, and according to its position, was a certain musical note. So he placed this image inside the drawing of a golden rectangle. A music expert then superimposed the drawing of a piano and documented the notes expressed by each point of the flowers and the stars. And finally, Fernando Ocheda loaded these notes into a music computer program. It was an incredible discovery. He obtained a melody of perfect harmony. And we have been listening to that so long. Spend time today, play it in your home or in your homes today. Thank you for coming and listening. God bless you.